Welcome to another fabulous Wednesday with the Burnett Group. Today we have Marty with us, so we've got just the girls here. We're going to dive into a fun topic. I know I say fun, but it is, especially when you're talking about buying your dream home or you're selling that home and you're ready to just take those profits and move up, or maybe you're moving down, maybe you're relocating. The offer process is extremely important. This is what sets the table for what's about to take place with presenting an offer or with accepting offers if you're the seller. So Marty, I'm looking forward to exploring this topic. You have a lot of expertise in this. You guys have done a lot of properties on both the buying and selling. So let's talk about the offer process and starting off with writing up an offer and what you advise clients and where you see some obstacles where maybe they push back a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great topic, and actually, this is the fun part and the exciting part for the buyers and or the sellers. Is that actual offer process. We talk a lot about preparation and getting ready to get to this point. So when you finally make it to this point, it's really exciting for the buyer and for the seller. Again, one of the big things that I do as a real estate professional is when we go into a house to look at it, or a property of any kind, commercial or whatever. We look at it differently than the buyer does. They're looking at the cabinets and the this and the that. I'm sticking my head in the crawl space. I'm walking up into the attic space if I can get in it, and just kind of peeking around for any obstacles that we can come up with. And sometimes I'll have buyers be like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Look, you look at the pretties. I'm going to look at the other stuff. If you really like this house and we decide we want to offer, I want to be prepared in how to offer." Now, given which market we're in, we've been in a seller's market for quite some time. We're getting stabilized a little bit. So these strategies could change, but I think regardless, before you make an offer on any property, as a buyer, we've got to look at everything. And I will point out things like, hey, did you notice there's like 5 windows in the house that have seals broken on them? I'm like, what does that mean? They're foggy. They still work, but cosmetically they're foggy. And, particularly in this market, sellers are not likely to replace that glass. Some of them might, and in a more of a buyer's market, you could get those things taken care of. But I want to make sure that we're not entering into a contract and then being like, oh my gosh, there's 5 windows that need glass replacing. That's, $400 a window times 5 windows, blah, 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 all that. Right. I want to make sure that we're not wasting time. So I'm looking at things that you're not. And I do point out that if we're making the offer, in the normal market, I would just say, let's just go ahead and negotiate the windows into the offer. There's no reason to pay $500 for a home inspection for him to tell you. I mean, we do still pay for the inspection, but I'm saying we already know that these, right. Let's negotiate these in up front.
Be upfront with it.
Negotiating sight unseen items. I'll point out things like, I always stick my head in the crawl space, and that sounds crazy, but you being from California, you'll know we have Californians coming in every day. They are not used to crawl spaces. Crawl spaces throw them for a complete loop. Used to slab build. So crawl space can be a damp, creepy, place of the house. So we do a little bit of education on what that means. We live, especially where I live in my personal house, we have a really high water table. So when it rains, the water gets saturated, and it rains really heavy. There's only so much absorption that can happen over time.
Wow.
You may get standing water. So at any given time, standing water in places like crawl spaces, corners, things like that, it's not uncommon. And most of the time it's really easily remedied, but it can really throw somebody for a loop. So always make sure, hey guys, I stuck my head in, it looks kind of damp, or it smells musty, or hey, it looks great, it's encapsulated,
wow.
Whatever. Just preparing them for what might need to be negotiated in up front. So.
You can send some of that water here to California. We absolutely need it. We do not have a damp issue.
It hadn't rained in a month, and all of a sudden, all of the holiday, 4th of July holiday, we were getting off and on storms and rains, but it was well received because we definitely needed it.
Sorry, I'm back on subject now. I'm like, rain? What? What's rain? What is that?
I know. We were just talking about tomatoes, and my poor daddy lost all of his tomatoes in his garden, and it was just
oh gosh.
So yeah, we had quite a bit of dry weather too, so I feel you.
Well, what are some of the other things that maybe a client is like, well, no, that's not important, that you're like, no, this is important and this is a part of the offer? Where do you see clients kind of push back with you sometimes on this offer presentation part?
I think, I try to explain to them the things that are typically paid for by sellers, typically paid for by buyers. That varies from market to market. especially if you're out of state. Title insurance is one of those things that it's a negotiable item. It's not necessarily something that the buyer has to pay for, the seller has to pay for. It's a negotiable fee. Now, the title insurance ensures good title on the property, so it is for the buyer. A lot of areas, the buyers always pay for that. It's never negotiated. Prior to this seller's market and a resale, it was highly, highly customary for the seller to pay for that. It was typically paid for them when they bought it. As the market shifted, that's changed. And a lot of times your builders, your new construction builders, they never would pay for that fee. That was always something that was
wow.
buyers. So sometimes people are just uneducated in different markets, like even from an East Tennessee to a West Tennessee to a Middle Tennessee thing. It is region, like kind of, it depends on where you live. So sometimes we'll get pushback on that if people are like, well, the last house I bought, no, where was that? Or what were the situations for that? So
sure.
Sometimes it's with the negotiation. I love to negotiate. I'm really looking forward to more of a buyer's market. I think that's a fun market when the buyer and the seller can come together and kind of negotiate out what you'll pay for and what I'll pay for. I mean, at the end of the day, we're all shooting for the same end goal. And to come together with some give and take, I think it always makes everybody feel good. So when it gets into an extreme seller or extreme buyer market, sometimes there can be angst there, like,
sure.
they take advantage of me or that sort of thing. So some of the pushback we've gotten in this market is more like what it takes to win the house. A lot of what we're doing right now is we are allowing the seller we're closing and then allowing the seller to stay for maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. I've seen in some situations where they've stayed up to a month or more.
That's a great thing to do. It really can make a difference.
It can make a big difference for the seller if they're trying to buy after they sell. So that's been a good thing. But there's also a lot of risk there. So I have some of these sellers or buyers that are a little bit more cautious. Like, what's my liability level there?
Sure.
It's a great question. I always tell people, you keep your insurance in place because you have documents that you sign that says it's temporary occupancy after closing. But let's say the house burned down during your temporary occupancy. It gets, or there's damage done to the house, or an HVAC goes out, or something like that during this occupancy agreement. So there are challenges with that. And so some of my super cautious, scared folks that are just, it just doesn't sit well with them. And so in this market, we've had to have some conversations. So that's probably, possession is one of those things. And then I've got some that are like, I'm not worried about it. This is great. Somebody's there. We're not going to be there, especially my out of town. We're not going to be there for 2 months anyway. So I'd rather somebody be there flushing the commodes, using the electricity, rather than sitting back.
Keeping care of the property. Exactly.
Yes, exactly. So.
Let's discuss the seller side. So, when offers then get presented, you've got the offers coming in and you're presenting to your seller, here's our potential buyers. What takes place with that conversation now with your sellers on how you advise which ones to take? Do you let them make that complete decision? Do you advise what to look at, read the fine print? How do you handle the selling side when these offers are presented?
I think it's probably, the seller side is probably the most difficult when it comes to offers, because you naturally want to look at the highest price and be like, boom, this one's 10 grand higher than anybody else. What are we talking about?
Right.
But there's so much more to the offers to look at and to realize, especially in today's market. People are bidding properties up, and you can bid up a $100,000 property to a $200,000 property. But if you put a contingency in there on appraisal, it's not going to appraise for $200,000. So it doesn't matter really what the sales price is when it comes to appraisal contingencies and financing. So one of the things we've been looking at in this market are what they call appraisal gaps. Who's willing to give the most amount over appraisal value? Sometimes they're appraising out, sometimes they're not. So, and there's no way to know. You can send out 5 appraisers and they're going to come up with 5 different values.
Right.
So,
and if you have questions on appraisals, watch one of our past episodes where we discussed appraisals for about 20 minutes. It's great. Take a look for it.
Appraisals, there's a lot of misconceptions about what an appraisal is.
Yes,
and what
exactly.
That's, like you said, we've talked about that before. So you got to look at, offer price. But you got to net out. There's expenses that come out of that. And, in a market where it's more of a set buyer's market, they may say, I'll give you, you've got a house that's listed at 300, I'll give you 310, but I want $10,000 back in my closing costs. So really that was a shell game. You know, they added it to the top. And again, it's contingent on appraisal. So what happens if it doesn't appraise? Where's that $10,000 coming from? Are you still committed to do that at a lower price? So there's all kinds of different things. You also need to look at, you know, we are getting cash offers here quite a bit. They're not as common as financing. Most people, especially with interest rates as low as they've been, and even if you have cash, borrowing money at interest rates the way they've been, I mean, it's crazy not to, right? So you have to look at the type of financing they're getting, how much they're putting down, you know, 100% loan versus a 50% loan. I mean, this guy's got 50% of the sale price. You know, so you're looking at strength in the buyers. I do think it's important as a real estate professional, and I do this a lot. I do it every time. I talk to the agents, whether I'm buyer or seller, I talk to the other agent because I want to get a feel for what's happening in this person's world. In this market, we're getting a lot of out-of-state buyers. Has your buyer physically been in the property? Yes or no? Did you do a Zoom or a FaceTime showing? How in detail was it? Have they reviewed the property disclosure? Some of these houses that are older, they know that the HVAC is 20 years old. Do they know that the roof is 20 years old? Because we don't want to tie up with you, and then your person comes down to look at it in person with their home inspection, and then they get out on a home inspection clause. Because the roof's 20 years old and HVAC is 20 years old.
Wow, that is so important.
We knew that ahead of time. So why did you contract? You know, so you got to be really, really careful. One of the things we're seeing right now, pretty bad, is out-of-state buyers locking up the property sight unseen at big high prices, and then coming into town to see it and bailing on inspection. What I suspect is happening, locking up multiple properties.
Yeah, that's snowballs.
Looking at all of them and deciding which one they want, which is extremely unethical unless they can afford to buy them all. But it's happening all over. I talk to other agents all over the country, honestly, but even local, and everybody's experiencing that. So you just have to be really careful. This whole idea of getting the offer in, just looking at the paper, just looking at the numbers, locking in and never having conversations, this is still a belly-to-belly business.
I hope all our out-of-state buyers just caught all of that. Don't be that person. Do not
be that guy.
Do that. You're affecting so many lives. Don't do it. Fly out and go see the property and make sure you're committed to it first.
Nobody likes that guy. No, I mean, and I've sold to many sight unseens that have come in and at day of closing. But I'm telling you, I've got that camera and I am like, do you see this scuff on the wall? Do you see this dent in the door? Do you see, you know?
Are you in the crawl space as well?
Yes. I stuck my head in the crawl space and guess what? It's dry. You know, whatever you got to do. I went in the attic, turned the lights on, looked around. It looks fresh up there, or it's full of crap. It's got stuff everywhere. You couldn't see anything, or, you know, you just have to know that if you're coming from out of state, you've got to trust your professional, and they've got to get their butt up and they got to go out there and they've really got to be your eyes and ears. So my out of state folks, call me. I mean, I'm going to do the diligence for you, and when you come in, you're going to want to buy that house. Flying back and forth, you know, looking at houses that don't fit your criteria, or you know you could have saved a trip. That's an expensive back and forth. So I've had several that have bought sight unseen, and knock on wood, I mean, we haven't had any issues, but I'm overly diligent with that.
You know,
so
I think
just got to be very diligent.
I think this could be a great future episode. I would love if we did this live stream where you're actually at a property with your cell phone and showing us how you really take a look at the property. Show us that crawl space. Show us what you're looking at, to give everybody a real-time look at how to check out these properties. What are the things we need to look for? I'm going to challenge you that we actually do this on one of our Wednesdays.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. And I think it's important because people don't know how to look at properties. Mm-hmm. And they go in and they fall in love. And this is an emotional purchase, guys. Yes. I mean, it's your home. You know, it's where you're going to raise your kids. It's where you're going to have your puppies and your fur babies and all these little things, you know, all these things that you.
Life moments.
Yeah, you're going to have friends and family over. You're going to have parties. You're going to envision all these emotional things. And sometimes that vision blurs. Oh, I didn't think about the fact that this could cost me X or that could cost me Y.
Yes.
You know, so that's where, you know, we got to be kind of careful, and I think it is important to take in all of that. So I think it's a great idea. I think we should definitely plan to do that on site.
That's the whole purpose of this, is to help educate everyone, whether you're the buyer, whether you're the seller, whether you're advising your parents or your kids on buying or selling, whether you're moving in from out of state. everybody lives in a home, so this really affects everyone.
We
How
had
does
a
it work
seller,
out?
like, what do you do when you're a seller? What do you look for? What are the things
Yes.
you fix? What are the things that you take care of prior to having buyers come in? I mean,
Yes.
I'm all about having a proactive seller, and every house I've ever sold, personally, and that's a lot of them because Matt and I've moved 9 times, and we've been married 18 years. So do the math.
And there's still 25.
Yes, exactly. I got married when I was 12. But we, we inspect, I have somebody inspect it, fix it all, and hand it to the buyers and say, here, this is what we've done, this is what they found. Inspect again if you want, no problem. We just trying to make that transition smooth. Because when you're talking about 30 days, and especially with the supply chain issues and things that we have now, we're not having time to get things fixed. Finding a vendor to do a small job is so difficult. And so knowing those things ahead of time and taking care of them ahead of time is really, really huge. Again, it's just being proactive, but I think that might be another good segment as well to talk about. But that
I think so too.
What I look for when they look at a house and what a seller looks for when they go to sell are very similar. So
I love it.
For both.
Great information today, as always, Marty. So next, we are going to be touring a property. We are lining up some other past clients to share their experience. And as always, we bring in professionals here. We talk to real estate attorneys. We talk to lenders. We've got great information coming up ongoing throughout the year. You don't want to miss the weekly Wednesday Live with the Burnett's. As always, great to see you, Marty.
Thank you.